Something is eating my Swiss chard. I've had really good germination. You can see at the back of this plot here, there are some little clusters there. That's a cluster of chard seedlings. Am I pointing in the right place? Round there somewhere anyway. You can see that reddish stem, perhaps. Yeah, I've had really good germination across that back row, but no plants getting any bigger than about 2 centimetres tall. And something's just eating them straight off. In fact, if you look here, you can see there's a stem and the leaves are kind of missing. And there's another one there and another one there. Now I know it's not birds because we've got netting over it. I don't think it's slugs because the lettuces are fine. I think woodlice or earwigs are eating those. So I'm going to have to start those again and we'll have another go, but I'm not going to plant them direct in the soil. Fortunately, it's not too late to have another go. So I've actually got 2 lots of seeds. That's last year's packet, this is this year's packet. I don't think these will have lost any viability significantly, but I think I'll start with these. I'm going to plant 2 per pot, and I've got 16 pots here, so I should end up with 32 plants, except I probably will end up with more because these little seed pods contain more than 1 seed, but you can't really break them open. So anyway, I'm just going to go for 2 in each container. Now this is probably more plants than I really expect to need, but I can give some away, and I haven't really got room for this many in the place where they've been eaten, but we can squeeze an extra plant of this around about the place, corners of patches and things. These are quite decorative plants, they're quite pretty, so if you look at the packet, it's perpetual spinach, but it's got a long stem and it's colourful. At least it's supposed to be, as long as they don't all grow the same colour. Now I'm just planting these into multi-purpose compost this time rather than seed compost, but what I will do is then cover them over with seed compost, just because this is easier to water without losing the seeds. So cover them over with a thin layer, about twice their own thickness of seed compost. And yeah, it's just a lot easier to get an even layer with this fine seed compost than with the more coarse multi-purpose compost. I'm just going to move the camera because it was on this workbench, it was in danger of falling over. Right, so that is my new chard seedlings, my new chard pots. I'll just press them down. So we should have, if they all germinate, 32 plants or more. Okay, and now we wait. So hopefully these won't take as long because I'm going to keep them in the greenhouse here and keep them away from whatever's eating them outside. So hopefully these won't take so long to germinate. Let's check in on my seeds that are growing here on the windowsill. So, golden sunrise tomatoes, these are doing extremely well. These are the ones I had to cut out the extra shoots, and actually after I cut out those shoots and made them into cuttings here, which we'll get to in a minute, after I snipped out those extra stems, they just shot up. So I'm not absolutely sure that was polyembryonic seedlings. If it was, I think they might have actually been fused at the root system, because when I cut off the extra sprouts, the remaining one just really took off. So that implies that there weren't completely separate root systems in there. Anyway, Marmande has now produced a seedling, and it's looking a little bit weedy, but it'll catch up. We've got 3 of Tigerella, we've got 3 of Gardener's Delight, and the cuttings that I took from my golden sunrise have now started to produce tiny roots down there. Can you see that? So there are little roots there on those tomato cuttings that are just in water. The water is a bit of a strange colour here because I just added a few drops of my bin juice fertiliser, my organic fertiliser, and that seems to actually have encouraged the roots to really take off. So they've got some food in that water rather than just water. Along the front here, cayenne peppers still not doing anything at all. No sign of any activity there. There is a little green speck just there, but that's a piece of vermiculite in the compost that's just got some algae growing on it or something. Cape gooseberries, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, a fifth one coming up there. That's it for the moment. So 5 plants at the moment, which actually is plenty. And Scotch bonnets, this is the seeds I saved from a Scotch bonnet I bought in a little ethnic deli. I've got one of those coming up here. Tomato plants are racing away here on the windowsill, and these are a problem. This is Golden Sunrise. They're really doing rather too well, and I can tell from the discoloration or faded colour of these leaves, and a little bit of purple veining actually in the leaves, that these are not doing so well because they've exhausted the nutrients in that little pot of compost there. So I'm going to take these seedlings and plant them into bigger pots. Okay, now fun fact about tomato plants. Most plants, when you pot them up into larger pots, you're meant to keep the nursery line the same. So the union between kind of soil and stem is at a particular level. You're meant to keep that the same. So you would bed this thing into the top of the surface so that this comes level with the new compost. Tomatoes, you don't need to do that. In fact, they like it if you don't. So I'm going to put a bit of compost in the bottom of these pots, like this. Quite a bit larger pots than this, but they'll quickly fill that up. And tomatoes are very vigorous rooters, so they will root from any bit of the stem. So if you take a piece of this stem and stick it in water, it will root. If you bury this stem in soil, it will produce roots from this upper part of the stem here. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Let's see if I can get these out one at a time without destroying them. So there's one. Now I'm going to plant that into this pot here, kind of there like that, and just gently fill around it with some more compost, like that, burying the stem. Now a lot of other plants won't like that very much at all. A lot of other seedling plants will get fungus and they'd rot and they'd suffer as a result of this. These tomatoes will love it. They'll produce extra roots, and also it stops this being such a leggy plant. So that's the plan. We'll do that. Did that with the other two. This little one here, I think we'll just keep it in this pot for now. Well, I have got a lot of these Golden Sunrise seedlings, but I'm going to give some away. I've got a neighbour who would like to give them a try. So hopefully this new compost as well will give these plants a bit of extra nutrition and will resolve this slight paleness in the leaves. It's actually not as bad as it looked indoors. The lighting out here and outdoors, the natural daylight is making it, it looks more or less okay. They're a bit pale. And they can stay out here in the downstairs greenhouse now, I think, because it's warm enough here at night that these won't suffer too badly. Certainly it's no colder out here than it is on the windowsill upstairs. Now, I was wondering what to do with this lonely little seedling here, but actually there are 3 spaces here, and 3 of my cuttings, these are the cuttings I trimmed off of these plants. So these are Golden Sunrise seedlings, and these were just where it produced more than 1 sprout per seed. And you can see I've just left them in water for a couple of weeks, and they've got a little root system on them. So I think we'll put 3 of them in here. One of them could do with a little bit longer in the water to develop its roots. So a little bit of seed compost in each of those 3 holes. I'm going to make a nice kind of deep hole, and then take one of these seedlings, just tease them apart. Actually, I'll just plonk them both in there and just gently drop the root system in there, and then firm it in with a bit more compost, and the same on that one. And then, yeah, only one of these is actually got enough roots on it to make it worth planting out at the moment. So that one can go in that hole. There we go. And tomatoes, as I say, they love to root. They're one of the easiest things to grow from cuttings. So we still have 4 Golden Sunrise seedlings there, even though I've just taken 3 out. And this little fella, I think we'll just leave it a little bit longer and see if it develops roots. There is something starting there, but it might not do anyway. If not, we've got plenty more. Just out for a little walk again today at Seatown again. Except this time, I think that rather than going west along the beach, we'll go east. We haven't been along this bit before. So we'll walk along here. So it looks like we should be able to get to the point out there. Maybe see around the corner to West Bay or something, or eat. Today we're finding loads and loads of cuttlebone on the beach. It must just be the time for that. And I've just found the first fossil of the day. That's actually quite a nice piece of ammonite. I think we'll have that. Yeah. So this end of the beach seems to be popular with people fishing. Might have a chat with one and see what they're catching. And we've got a paraglider up there and another one up there. Now these cliffs here are unstable, as always along here, so I don't really want to get too close to the cliffs, although at this part here we kind of have to. So I think we just not hang about on the bit that's most at risk. There's an interesting find. That's a mermaid's purse. It's the empty egg case of a species of shark, a dogfish probably, or might be a ray. Quite a lot of pieces of plastic on the beach here. It's a bit disappointing. So on the way back we'll see if we can pick up a bag full. Stripy rock there, trying to decide whether that's a piece of lime bay agate or chert or whatever. As always, when we're walking in front of the cliffs, we're doing it when the tide is falling, so that we've got the maximum amount of beach to walk on, and so we don't get stranded up against the cliff. Because when the tide comes in, I think it can go up as far as these cliffs. It can actually wash against them on a high spring tide. But yeah, there's just such a lot of this cuttlebone around. You want that? Do you want it? Might be a bit salty. Probably better for your teeth than rocks. No. Little springs there coming out of the cliff face. And of course groundwater is one of the things that loosens these cliffs and makes them prone to falling. This big bit here, obviously you can see, must have slumped quite recently. I think that was on the news. So up there's a kind of ledge which was the original cliff top. I think I remember seeing it on the news. So this bit here is not really very likely to come down anymore, at least not very fast now. So we're quite safe to walk along this bit here in amongst these rocks, even though it's quite narrow. The cliff has done most of its falling. How about that for a cuttlebone? That's the biggest one I've seen, I think. If we had a parrot or a budgie, obviously we'd take one of them home for it. I've done metal casting into cuttlebone as well. That was quite interesting.
I'll link to that in the video description and in this card. But yeah, we'll have a little rummage around here amongst these rocks, because this is where a lot of material has fallen into the sea, or fallen onto the shore, and then been washed and tumbled and so on. So this is where we might find fossils that have washed out. Interesting. Thoughts on what that might be in the comments if you've got any. So I found a piece of belemnite split in half, so you can see the kind of internal structure there, or such as it is. Not a piece that's worth keeping though. There's a little ammonite in the rock there, which is peculiar because it's on its edge. Here are the bedding planes of the rock going through here, and yet we've got this ammonite here that's kind of sideways on. That's unusual. Normally they're laying flat, kind of parallel to the bedding planes of the rock. Here's another one there. That's a pyritized ammonite right there. I'm not going to try and chip them out of the rock. We can't do that with this kind of, this is quite hard rock. You can just destroy them trying to get them out. But it does prove that there are fossils at this end of the beach. Well, why wouldn't there be? It's the same rock formations up there, and all of this cliff that's slumped down was all kind of sandstones and shales and whatnot, and that will have been washed and broken up by the sea. And in theory, any of the more durable fossils that were in there will be lying here on the beach waiting to be discovered. Quite a few pieces of this. This is iron ore, which has obviously come out of the cliff face somewhere. Oh boy! Seems to be actually trapped in the cliff face by a fallen rock. I did see something interesting down here. Just the texture. Yeah, we've got rocks here with bits of shell in them. Bit hard to see what they are, but bits of bivalve by the look of it in sandstone. There's quite a few pieces of this. I'm not sure whether that's a piece of just a beach flint that's been heated in a beach fire, where somebody's had a beach fire along here, or if that's a piece of something else, piece of jasper or banded iron or something. I suppose we should probably have a look at some of these loose pieces of sandstone, because there's a possibility that we'd find a decent fossil in one of these. There's something inside of that one, just there, but I don't know what it is, and I'm not going to take a whole chunk of rock home. The tide is still falling, so on the way back hopefully we'll get a bit more of the foreshore, which is where we'll find the loose finds if there are any. So this is kind of amazing here. This big chunk of sandstone, I think that's sandstone quartzite, something like that maybe. Been really carved by the action of the waves. Quite big. It's kind of chunk carved out of it there. Just because it's had, imagine that might have been standing up actually. It may have been on the beach 90 degrees rotated from that, and maybe the waves washed around the bottom and banged all of this shingle against it every time the waves broke, and that would have undercut like this. And then presumably when it was sufficiently undercut, it couldn't stand up on its own anymore and toppled over like that. So just in the half an hour it's taken to walk along this beach, you can see there's a lot more rocks there exposed than we saw from the other side. The tide is falling, and it will continue falling for the next few hours, so we're not at risk of getting washed away. I know I talk about that a lot, but it is something you kind of got to obsess over on this coast, because the risk of getting stuck up against the cliffs by a rising tide is real. That's a piece of belemnite. I'm on two minds as to whether to take that because it's so worn, but it is a rather nice piece. I'll put it in my pocket for now. Maybe if we see some kid that's forlornly looking for fossils, I might hand it off to somebody who wants it more than me. You do have to watch out for snooker waves. Every now and again you get a wave that comes in higher than all the others. Jenny's just pointed out this bit of cliff here. You can see there's a big crack and an overhang. That bit there is quite precarious. We won't walk underneath that. In fact, I can see more cracks further up. That'll come down sometime in the next day, week or so. So we'll just make sure we're not under it now, in case now is the moment. Now these washes here are probably the best place to look for fossils, because it's continually getting turned over. You found anything, Eva? Any fossils? No? Lots of pyrite nodules in here as well. I found a few more bits of belemnite. We'll look at them when we get back to the house. We'll do a wrap up on the fossils, and I'll probably only actually show you anything that's particularly notable right here on the beach, but I did find a couple more bits of belemnite, including one with an interesting hole in the end. We'll look at that later. Well, I thought we might be able to get a view round to West Bay from here, but it looks like maybe this cliff fall on the end here is going to prevent us. We'll see how far we get. I can see that the rocks down there get a little bit more covered in algae. Presumably they're not uncovered by water for so long as these ones here are. Or perhaps they've just been there longer. So if we get slippery rocks there, I'm not going to try and clamber over slippery rocks. Fascinating piece of sedimentary stone here that's worn away, exposing all the different layers in this pattern like this. What's up with you? This looks like a concretion, doesn't it? But I don't think it is. I think this is just where it's worn into this particular shape. Some impressive sized limpets here. And on that rock there, some whoppers there. Well, yeah, I'm going to go and see how far we can get. That bit of cliff up there does look a little bit iffy, but yeah, I'm going to go along here, see how far we can actually get. See if we can just get a view of West Bay from up here, but I need to be careful, make sure I'm not treading on slippery rocks. Yeah, I think we're going to do it. Okay, here in this rock we've got traces of ammonite, so spot the ammonite. I can see 2 at least. Spot the ammonites. Okay, I'll show you what I can see. So here is the trace of an ammonite. So you can see where the shell must have gone round there. And there's the spiral shape of the shell there. And there's another one here, which is really not so easy to see. But you can see the little trace of just the internal parts of the shell. It's probably more that I'm not even seeing. Right, having to be quite a bit more careful here because these rocks have got algal growth on them. So I'm not going to take any silly chances here. Just picking my way through on the rougher and drier rocks. And yes, we can see West Bay. Okay, that might be as far as I go. So there we go, that's the cliffs of West Bay over there. They're the ones that fall down all the time. There's a very, very narrow strip of beach along there in front of those cliffs, and people routinely picnic there, and it's extremely dangerous. Anyway, I don't think it's a good place to be here though, because, well, for one thing, I'm stuck on the rocks, and, whoops, and yeah, it's just nowhere to stand here. It's all loose rocks. Let's get back over to Jenny and Eva. Eva was calling for me there, did you hear her? And yeah, there's not much to see in amongst all this lot anyway, so let's get out of the way of these big rocks and we'll have a wander back along the foreshore. Now more of it is exposed. See if we can find anything else interesting to look at. So with a bit more of the flat bed of the beach exposed, we can walk along here at the slightly elevated risk of getting wet feet. But we'll have a little look around in amongst all these pyrite nodules, see if we can find a pyritized ammonite. I'm not tremendously hopeful we're going to be lucky. A pretty stripy rock. Whenever I see a stripy rock like this, I always think, okay, would that polish up well? Chances are it wouldn't. Chances are that would probably never take a proper shine. It's probably a piece of sandstone or something like that. There's an interesting pyrite formation there. So again, that's like that little mushroom-shaped one we found at Charmouth the other day. That's probably indications of some sort of bubble or some cavity forming in a piece of mud originally. Oh, go on then. And then filling in with pyrite after it had solidified. But often these pyrite nodules are like that. They've got quite a nodular shape, where they've either been concretions that have formed around something and sort of grown spherically, or they've infilled a spherical hole that was left by a gas bubble or something like that. So here's a nice ammonite, fairly good state of preservation. Oh gosh, I'm tempted. It's in a chunk of rock though. I am tempted, but I think that's too big a piece to take home. Okay, I stand corrected. Jenny says we've got to take this one home. So that's what we'll do. There's another one of those things there. Look, that's a piece of belemnite where there's a hole in the end. That's the third one of those I found. Another ammonite here in this piece of sandstone. And it's really weird. Again, it's at right angles to the bedding planes of the rock. That is just so unusual, or at least it seems so to me. I mean, does that indicate that that animal was burrowing in sediments when it died and then got covered over by layers, and so it fossilized that orientation because it was burrowing in the mud? I don't know. Is that a thing that we know ammonites did? Do we know what ammonites did? There's a different kind of fossil there. Looks like a piece of a cockle shell or a little scallop or something like that. Part of a bivalve shell. There's another one there where it's been eroded away, leaving just the outside of the shell. And I think that's what I probably found in that rock that I split in half. Eva, Eva. Now we have got here in this one just the end of a bivalve there, plus something else. But you can see that was a bivalve shell there, and we can see both halves of it, and it's just eroded back a little bit. Yeah, there's something else there. I don't know what that is. Not taking that home. There is a limit to how many of these larger pieces of rock it's reasonable to take home. If you found something that's a fantastic specimen, that kind of makes the argument for it, but there are a lot of things here that are not quite so good specimens. Although I bet if you took this rock and sliced it and polished it, I bet that would make some interesting pictures, I'm sure. She's gesturing to me that she's found something. Let's go and have a look and see what it is. Oh yeah. Okay. That's nice. Biggest ammonite we've seen today. Oh, what's left of it. So starting from around about here and going all the way there, and you can see the suture lines. These would have been individual chambers, and as the organism grew, it sealed off the chamber and lived in the next bit. And so yeah, you can actually see the lines all the way around there. So these are the bits which joined the segments of its shell as it successively, as it started off as a tiny little animal and grew and grew and grew and extended its shell. So this bit of beach here I'm standing on wasn't here when we were walking out because it was covered by the water. The tide had receded. You can see we were up on that shelf there, and it's receded all the way down here just while we've walked along, pointing at things and wittering. So this is unexplored for today anyway, this bit. We're the first people to look at this since the water went down. I've got a pocket full of belemnites I found. Something interesting about most of them, which we'll have a look at back at home. You right, Eva? Good girl? Your tongue's sticking out. Okay. Whoa. So here's another one Jenny's just found. Really nice sort of calcite infill there. And it is of a size that we could potentially take home. Oops, well, nearly got wet feet. But I think it's a bit too big to take home, that one. But it seems like at this end of the Seatown beach anyway, the best ammonite fossils are found in this yellowish red sandstone, if that's what it is. But one thing I did find that's not a fossil, we found a book on the beach. It's only just been dropped, but asked all the people around and they don't know about it, so free book. So just before we go home, actually, well, we're probably going to stop and have a pint up in the pub up here. But before we go home, actually, it's worth noting there's something different about this beach from what we've seen last time we were here. Normally that river or stream there cuts through this bank and makes its way to the sea somewhere down here. Today it's not doing that. It just disappears into the shingle. And I think this is because we've had some really stormy weather, and so the beach has all washed back up here and created this embankment. And so now the river, that's not a static pool, it is still flowing, it's just flowing underneath the gravel. The beach is a mess. Most of this mess isn't anything to worry about, it's feathers and cuttle bones and bits of driftwood, but there is a lot of plastic waste. We'll pick up what we can.
So right, this is the haul from Seatown on the Eastwood Beach. Starting with this section of ammonite. Now this is a curious one because it's a different colour from the ammonites I found there previously. So this is one I found on the Westwood Beach, and this is more typical for the ammonites I found there. I found quite a few pieces like this where it's obviously quite worn. Interesting, you can see little traces there of crystallization. That might even be traces of the original shell. In fact, this one's got similar sparkly bits in there as well, but different mineralization. And that's because at the eastward end of the beach, the fossils are mostly found in this kind of reddish, yellowish sandstone. In fact, just as we look here now, I can see actually there is a ammonite. We're seeing a cross section of it, sort of like that in the rock there. And there are probably other things to be found here as well. However, anyway, that's the worn, tumbled ammonite we found, which is nice. There's this one, which we found still in the matrix. And it's a different kind of ammonite from what we found before, different species. Much more closely spaced segments on this one. And somebody watching can probably tell me what species of ammonite or what genus of ammonite that is. But again, it's really strange here because there are the bedding planes in this rock going through that way. And the fossil is there like that. Normally what you find is the ammonites are lying flat on the bedding planes and they get sandwiched in between the layers of sedimentary rock. And sometimes they get flattened as that rock gets compressed. That has not happened here. This is a much more sort of jumbled, tumbled piece of stone. In fact, the bedding planes go through there like that. So they are, that's the lines of them there. But yeah, you can just about make out where the strata are. Anyway, curious. So if you know what species of ammonite that is, do let me know. And then we found belemnites, quite a lot of little pieces of belemnite, but curiously, look at this. Now, I've not seen this before. Normally when I find belemnites, they're just like that. They're blunt or flat at one end. But 5 of them here have got a distinct hole in the end. And in fact, that rock I saw where there was a piece sticking out, I bet that was one of these. So I don't know if this is a different kind of belemnite to the ones we find in the other strata, maybe a different species, or maybe this just is a piece of the anatomy of the belemnite that we don't normally see, is normally broken away. And what we normally find is you know, further up or something. I don't know. I might have to research that. Don't know why I picked that one up. So anyway, that's the fossil haul from Seatown on the Eastwood Beach. A parcel has arrived. If I'm right, this is some seeds I ordered. Let's have a look and see what we got in it. That's all that's in there. Yes, so this is seeds for, let's see if I can get this right, Okahijiki, which is otherwise known as land seaweed. It's a succulent plant that is grown widely in Japan, a bit like marsh samphire. It's a coastal salt-loving plant. I believe it's actually distantly related to marsh samphire. It's in the amaranth family. And in fact, you can kind of get that from the seeds. The seeds of these little corky fruits. They're a bit like spinach or sea beet or beetroot seeds or chard or whatever. Anyway, I got this from World Wonders Gardens on eBay. And I'm going to grow these in the garden. And so this is an annual plant that produces succulent, sort of fleshy, thread-like leaves. And supposedly quite good to eat. So let's plant these in a couple of pots, and I can plant them out when they've sprouted. And as I say, they're very reminiscent of the little clusters that you get on sea beet and on leaf beet, beetroot, chard, those sorts of things. They're little corky capsules, because I believe this is a coastal plant, and so again these little corky capsules are adapted to float. So they would break off the plant, blow down the beach into the sea, float away and wash up somewhere else on a different bit of beach or salt marsh or whatever, and germinate there. Now, I think I'm going to plant a few of these in a pot, and then as soon as they're up, I'll do something. I'll move them into something else. So I think we'll go for 4 clusters in each pot. Now, each of these little fruits probably has more than one seed in it, so we might get more than one sprout per hole. There we go. I'll just cover those over and firm them down a little bit. Okay, plenty more there to plant. Now we just need a tag. Now it's important to tag plants. Don't imagine that you'll remember what they are when they germinate if you're growing a lot of different things. What's it called? Okahijiki. Okay, something like that. Always do that. And because I've run out of space in those little propagators, I'm going to put these in a plastic bag. That's not good. See, they floated up to the top, these little seeds, because they are buoyant. I'll just make sure they are actually covered again. Right, that should be enough water. So we'll seal that up. Just make sure that those feel like they've got a bit of water in them. We'll seal that up. That can go on a windowsill alongside one of those propagators we've got. And hopefully in a week or two. Does it say how long on here? Germination usually takes around 10 to 21 days. So you might even see that in this video.
We are up here today at Maiden Castle. Maiden Castle near Dorchester. That's Dorchester over there. Poundbury over there. This is an Iron Age hill fort. Incredibly impressive earthworks here. An absolute maze of earthworks to get into the entrance here. I'm just going to walk the perimeter wall here. So this bit here would have been kind of in a compound. This would be where there'd been a settlement of some sort. And as I've said a few times before, anyone trying to attack the place would have to go up and down lots of rather steep banks, or weave around in a maze-like arrangement of ditches. You can imagine. Well, so you're a defender of the settlement of Maiden Castle. Up here there's probably a wooden palisade on top of this bank, on top of this dike, and then attackers, hopeful attackers, are trying to climb up a near vertical slope there. Easy target for archers, or even just hurling rocks at them. Dog on a lead today because lots and lots of sheep, including young lambs, around. So Doggo has to be under control. She would chase them. She doesn't mean any harm. She just likes running with things that like running. And she doesn't realise that the sheep are running because they're trying to get away from her. So yeah, we'll just walk around the perimeter, I think. Town of Dorchester over there. And the newer development of Poundbury, which is up on the hill there, although we're looking down on it today, which is an unusual view of that. Is Poundbury a town or is it a village? It's like a weird theme park for old-fashioned buildings. I will take you there sometime and we'll have a wander around the place because it's truly weird. One thing I've seen quite a lot on the really steep hillsides here in Dorset is these horizontal lines. They're almost like little terraces. Now, I don't know how modern or ancient those are,
and how artificial versus natural they are. I don't know if that's just a case of those are sheep tracks that have worn into the hillside and become sort of self-reinforcing over time, or if perhaps those are the remains of ancient terraces. I mean, this is a south-facing bank. Despite being part of the earthworks surrounding the fort, it could have been part of a system of cultivation, but I don't know. So let me know in the comments if you know anything about why I keep seeing these structures. Is this just the way the chalk slumps and the way the hillsides evolve over time as a path gets worn by sheep or deer or rabbits or other animals or humans? Or is this built this way on purpose? I mean, obviously terraces stop water just cascading down the hillside and eroding it, but is that part of a deliberate structure, or is it just the way things are self-arranging? See, when we look at them over there on that bit of hillside that's not quite so steep, those do look like deliberate terraces, don't they? So was that just the way they built those things so that they didn't wash away when it rained? Was that part of a system of cultivation? Answers in the comments if you know. Right, there is over here inside of this central compound what appears to be the remains of some sort of structure, walls maybe. I don't know whether it's ancient, whether it might be just some modern thing or whatever. We'll go and have a look. So leaving the outer sort of ring now, or inner ring I suppose it is. Gosh, it's quite breezy up there, and it's still only April, so that breeze has got a little bit of a nip in it. Oh yes, so definitely some sort of structure. I wonder if this is Roman, so after Iron Age. It definitely looks a little bit too orderly to be Iron Age, and most of the dwellings up here when this was an Iron Age hill fort would have been roundhouses made of wattle and daub or something like that, and with thatched roofs. This looks very rectilinear, and so it's a structure. It has some sort of, would that have been an inner courtyard perhaps? I'm guessing Roman. There's a post over there which hopefully has some sort of information on it, but yeah, I am ahead of this, reading this thing, guessing this was a Roman villa or something. Oh great, yeah, well, there's no sign, so I will have to research that separately, and I'll put that on the screen about whatever that is. But yes, sign has been defaced, unfortunately, destroyed. So coming around now to the south side, over those hills over there would be Weymouth. The old Roman road runs out of Dorchester down to Weymouth.
Well, yeah, obviously the roads. I mean, the roads go without saying, don't they?
There's some signage up there. Let's go and see if there's anything interesting to see on those signs up there. Might tell us a little bit more about what we're looking at. Okay, so this is the eastern entrance. Oh, right, so yes, so there were pits where they had rounded pebbles from Chesil Beach, which is quite a long way off over there. And so, yeah, they had stocks of rounded pebbles to throw or sling at attackers in the Iron Age occupation. Cool, okay. Right, we're going to head out this way. So again, on what's called the eastern entrance, you've got again this maze-like arrangement of dikes.
where anyone wanting to actually get into the place would have had to navigate quite a circuitous path. And that means if they're not friendly, that would take time, and that's time during which they would be vulnerable to being, well, having those big cobbles hurled at them that we saw on that sign. Right, I think there's a gate over there. I think that's where we need to go. And of course the earthworks we're seeing here are the remains after thousands of years of wearing down from the weather and, well, people like ourselves walking these little paths and wearing away the hillside. So when these were in their original condition, they probably would have been taller, possibly steeper, and probably would have had wooden palisades on top of some of them. So just again, imagine the effort to dig this all out by hand.
A package has arrived. This, I know what this is. This is some seeds I ordered. I know, again, this video has been significantly seed oriented, but this is something quite special that somebody told me about and I had to get it. Okay, so this is some seeds for a variety of pepper called Lesia or Lesha. This variety originated in Ukraine, and this is supposedly the sweetest pepper you can get. It's a heart-shaped, sort of pointy, looks like it ought to be a little chili, but it's, you know, fist-sized, heart-shaped pepper, apparently with really thick flesh, really sweet flavour, and I'm going to grow it. And apparently this is a good one for saving seeds from year to year, so it's an open pollinated variety. This is a bonus packet I got, and Iko sweet pepper. Okay, I might save those for next year, grow them next year. Oh, what's this as well? I've got a surprise variety pack. Okay, that I didn't order. That I also didn't order, so these both must be free. That's the only thing I ordered and paid for. Okay, surprise variety pack. Contains over 20 different varieties, including Carolina Reaper, But Jolokia, Aji Charapita, Dorset Naga, and Tide Dragon. Those, at least the ones I recognise, are super hot varieties. Not really for me, but I might give those to my son, see if he fancies growing them. Anyway, this is the one I was really after, which is Lesia. I'm going to plant these today. We're not too late to plant them. We're in April. This is really the end of the time when you can plant them. But apparently the good thing with this plant is you can overwinter it. So if I grow this in a big pot, I can overwinter it in one of the greenhouses and hopefully it'll fruit year on year. We'll give that a try anyway. I meant to say I ordered these from Red Dragon Welsh Chili Seeds. There's a flyer in here for that with some instructions on what to do. But anyway, going to crack on, plant some of these peppers. Okay, I feel like by now you know the routine on this, so I shan't dwell on it too greatly. Seeds are packaged inside of a little baggie. Okay, now I'm only going to plant 4 of these seeds because I only have 10. And I've got to allow for contingency in case of failures. So if I do something wrong, we can have another go, potentially. Some people did suggest plant 2 seeds in each hole and pinch out the weaker seedling. I think that probably is good advice if you have an abundance of seeds. But for these, where I've only got 10 seeds in total, I think I prefer to waste a little container of compost than I would to waste a seed. So I'd prefer to just, if I wanted to plant that many plants, fill up 8 modules and put 8 seeds in separate modules. And if some of them don't come up, then I can just recycle that compost or reuse that compost. I'd rather do that than plant 8 seeds in here and destroy 4 of them. It might just be me. Anyway, I'll give that a bit of water, put that in the propagator, and hopefully that will still come up and catch up with the others in time to produce some plants that will fruit this year.
Today we've got some potatoes to plant. Second earlies. And I'm going to grow them in these big tubs. I think these are the ones I used last year, and it worked pretty well. So I've got to get them about sort of half full of compost, and then we'll place the potatoes. And the compost I'm going to use is just one of these grow bags, maybe 2 of them actually. Just going to, rather than grow it in the bag, I'll slice off the end, we'll just use that as compost in those pots. Pretty good. Okay, and then we're just going to place 3 of these potatoes in each tub. So we've got some room for it to grow down, but also some room for us to earth this up. So we'll do 3 in this one too. Okay, we'll give those a little covering of earth, maybe just so it's like a couple of centimetres above the shoots. Okay, and we're just going to move these, I think, to their final position, which I think will be somewhere near the back of this plot. I'll have them, well, actually they need a bit more sun here, so we'll have them near the front of this plot here. Okay, okay. Okay, that should be good. And they'll need a bit of feeding now and again. And once the shoots come up and clear the top of the pots, I'll consider earthing them up by adding a bit more compost up to the rim. For feeding those, I am again doing my bin juice compost. So I've got this old bin, it's got a hole drilled in the front just down there. And then inside we've got all of the soft weeds. So nettles, comfrey, dandelions, sow thistle, all of the kind of soft leafy weeds go in there, weighed down. There's a piece of mesh in the bottom on top of 2 bricks, and out of the bottom drips this amazing plant food. At the moment it's still a bit weak, you can actually see through it. Later on that will come through and it will be dark like Marmite, and it will need dilution. Are you quite comfortable there? Okay. So yeah, I'll be using that to feed all of the plants really in the garden here, but especially the potatoes, which will be quite hungry feeders. Let's have a look at the other things while we're here. The fennel's up now. Quite a lot of fennel come up there. Radishes coming up. No sign yet of the lamb's lettuce. Well, maybe actually. Yeah, it could be. A few bits of it coming up there. And no sign yet of the peas. Well, I thought I did see one the other day, but maybe a bird's had it. The broad beans are doing well, although these ones are a little bit straggly. These are ones we planted last year. So I planted these in autumn and they overwintered, but they've got a mass of flowers on them. Look at those flowers. These are the ones here we planted this spring, and they're doing well. Actually, these are going to come in a bit later, so these will flower later after these are finished, so we should have a succession of crop, which is good. And then runner beans are going to go in the end here. I think it's nearly time to plant those. It's not quite warm enough outside yet to plant those straight in the soil. Yet another parcel has arrived. This one is one I'm really excited for, and I think I might have said that about the last 2 actually, but this is my last lot of seeds for this year. Okay, all we've got is that little foil packet. These came all the way from Poland. And wow, that doesn't look at all dodgy, does it? Okay. And these are seeds for chilies again, but a particular kind of chili. This is a species. Most chilies and red peppers are cultivars of the species Capsicum annuum, which interestingly is not an annual, but it's grown as an annual. So even like the hottest hot peppers and the sweetest sweet peppers are the same species of plant. They've just been developed in different ways. Capsicum annuum. There are other capsicums and sometimes they're hybridized. I think Capsicum fruticans is another one. But anyway, this one is Capsicum flexuosum, which is a species of pepper, and it has the interesting distinction of being frost tolerant. So in theory, these are capsicums. These are little chilies that we can plant out in the garden and they might survive the winter. The seeds are quite different to your kind of standard chilies. As you can see, they're little kind of hard black seeds, different from regular chilies. I'm going to plant maybe half a dozen of them today and we'll save the rest. The peppers that this thing produces are interesting as well because they look a lot like cherry tomatoes. Obviously, peppers are related to tomatoes. They're in the same family, the Solanaceae, which is
the potato family, basically. But these are not your regular chilies. So I'm going to plant 6 of them, I think. Now, these might take a while to germinate. So I'm not anticipating that these may necessarily fruit this year. And of course, I'm not going to just plant them out and let them take their chances. I'm going to plant them in tubs, and we'll probably overwinter them in the greenhouse the first year, and maybe try and harden them off a little bit and see which ones do the best. And then we'll maybe plant one out in a really well-drained, sunny area in the garden and see if we can actually have outdoor chilies. It's a shrub as it grows. I mean, most of these things are kind of soft shrubs rather than herbaceous annuals. But there we go, Capsicum flexuosum. And this is probably my last lot of seeds I'm going to buy this year, actually, because we're getting past the point where you should be planting seeds. Anyway, you know the routine. I'm not even going to show it. I'm just going to plant these in a couple of little modules, keep them in the propagator, see what happens. After just a few short days, we've got signs of germination in this Swiss chard. So one there, I can see another one coming up just there, another one there, and one over there. So that was really quick. And what I'm going to do, I will grow these on in these pots until they are more than just seedlings. So hopefully by the time I plant them out, they will be established plants with a root system and a crown and multiple leaves. And that way, even if the top growth gets eaten, if they've got a crown they can regrow from, then they stand a better chance. I never did find out what is eating them. My suspicion still lies with earwigs or woodlice. Sunflower update. Not blue sunflower update. These are my sunflower seedlings. We've got 8 of them up now, so 75% germination, which is not bad. But these need potting on now because they're getting a little bit too big. So I'm going to put these into larger pots. We need to be really careful because they don't like their roots disturbed. So to pot on those sunflower seedlings, I want to try to make some paper pots. I have got a device for making little pots out of paper, a paper potter. It's a wooden thing and you kind of twist it and it makes little paper pots, but they're too small. And I want something that's a bit bigger. So the plan is, I'm going to use this drinking glass to kind of roll up a paper pot like that, twist the bottom together, and then take the glass out. And we'll end up with something about that size. Now, it's very flimsy, but if I stack these in a container of some sort, fill them with compost, I can put my sunflower seedlings into the top here. I mean, perhaps I want to... Perhaps what we'll actually do is fold over a little rim here as well, just to make that top bit a bit stronger. So, like that. Like that on the bottom. Now we can't get the thing out. Let's try putting that rim the other way around then. So, so we get this folded rim. Like that. Maybe three folds that do it. It's not behaving very well, this paper. Not staying folded. Right, put that down like that. Glass on there like that. And then that goes around there like that. That's better. Twist the bottom and slip out the glass. Yeah, that'll do it. And so I'll place that in there for now. The paper won't have much integrity, but it hasn't got to last long. This is only going to last long enough to get these things rooted. And I probably won't even take them out of this paper when I put them in the garden. I'll probably just plant the whole lot because this is a newspaper printed with soy-based ink on unbleached paper. So no problems with putting that straight in the garden, letting that rot down. The roots will just grow through it. Right, need to clear a bit of space on the potting bench here actually, but while we're here, these are the chard seedlings, doing very well, and as you can see, each seed has produced multiple seedlings. I'm not sure that I'm going to bother thinning them, because whenever you see chard growing, it's always clumps of the stuff anyway, so I think we'll leave it be. It seems to be only the red ones that have come up at the moment. Maybe that's the one that's kind of fastest, because it's the one that's closest to wild type. Right, this is my prototype, which I've already put some compost into. I'm going to put them in these pots to constrain them. That seems to be the solution. And I suppose we should test this with one of these first before I go and make the rest of the pots. So we're going to want compost up to a certain point, about there. So that's actually already at the rim of the pot. And then carefully lift out one of these seedlings, trying not to disturb the roots, and just hold that in place while we fill around it with compost. That seems to be working. I reckon that'll do it. Most of that compost is constrained inside the pot anyway, but there's a good depth of soil there. There's about that much extra compost for these roots to grow down into. Hopefully that'll do it. So I've got 7 of my sunflowers there potted up like that. Just as a kind of control really, to figure out whether I'm wasting my time and effort with this paper pot, because I haven't really gained very much height. I think we do one control in a pot like that. So with my last seedling, which is one of the smaller ones of course, so I'll have to allow for that. Trying to minimize disturbance to the soil as much as possible. Pretty much achieved that there. Now, of course, one thing that might happen here is this paper might decompose before these plants are ready to go out in the garden. I'm hoping that won't happen. And they can stay out here in the greenhouse now, I think. It's not a heated greenhouse, but the nighttime temperature here is no colder than it is on the windowsill where these were germinated. In case you're wondering, those birds in the background are rooks. We have a rookery in our oak tree. And they've got young that are just fledging actually at the moment, so they're quite vociferous. Good water in. Now I think while we're here, rather than wait and see if the remaining 4 seeds come up, I'm just going to dig up those seeds and see if there was any germination there. That will give us a measure of what the total sort of germination rate was. At the moment we're at 8 out of 12. So that's 75%, which is not great. It's not terrible either. Is there any sign of germination in these ones here? So, oh yeah, we've got a root on that one. I'm not going to grow these on because I think 8 sunflowers is enough for the space I have, at least the space I intend to commit to them. No sign of the seed in that one. Is it possible that I just forgot to put a seed in that one? Really? It's got to be there somewhere. Oh, no, there it is. That one didn't germinate. Okay, this one here, there is germination because we've got a root. And this one here, there is also germination. So actually, that's 11 out of 12, which is this percentage. I said I wasn't going to, but I will. Let's see if we can actually manage to save these sunflowers from destruction. So yeah, it's got a root system, it's got a tap root developing on there. I think what I'll do is I'll just bury that so it's just coming through the soil. Press it down nice and firmly so that root can grip the soil, and then water in. So I'll have 11 seedlings like that in total. I'm not very sure that these are going to do anything because that's not what we meant to do. Now you might be wondering, why am I not direct sowing these sunflower seeds straight into the garden? Well, for one thing, I'd have to start a lot later if I did that. They are hardy annuals, but you'd be waiting another 3 weeks probably for planting before that And obviously I had to get that video out on fake sunflowers, which does include some of the germination. I've still got some seeds left, so I could still direct sow some in various places in the garden. But if I direct sow sunflowers in this garden, I would predict that I would lose 90% of them to slugs and snails. Just because snails and slugs seem to love just eating that little growing tip, the apical bud, on these plants. And so what happens is you get a sunflower that comes up, the snail comes in and just nibbles out that that little sweet bud on the top there. The plant continues trying to develop its seed leaves, but it has no growing point, and it just sits there with 2 seed leaves that get bigger and bigger, and then it dies. Okay, so that's that. These will stay out here, as I say. This bench is getting a bit crowded now. This is my Rubus elisabrosus, my funberry, that I potted up, and it's really doing very well. It's coming on very nicely. Looks like it could do with a feed. There's a little bit of yellowing in the veins of the leaf there, so I will give that little feed. Most of the tomatoes are now potted on as well. So we've got Golden Sunrise at the back. These are the ones with hybrid vigour, and look at the difference. So Golden Sunrise, Gardener's Delight, Tigerella, and then these are the Golden Sunrise cuttings that I made when I pinched out the second seedling from these pots. So these are coming on, and again these are almost overtaking the non-F1 hybrid varieties. Some of these plants are looking a little bit, that one's a bit, that's overwatered, I think, but it'll come back. It's got some healthy growth there. I think I was a little bit late in potting some of these up, but it won't be very long before these can go out into the greenhouse where I'm going to grow them in the soil. It's pickling time. I've just been out to the woods and picked a massive, lovely basket full of ramsons, wild garlic, and I'm going to lacto ferment this. Now, that requires packing it in a jar with salt water and just letting nature take its course. The lactobacilli that are naturally present on these leaves will ferment the pickle and make it sour and tasty. And the salt that I'm going to add will enable those bacteria to overcome any other things that want to grow in the solution. So anyway, procedure. I have in the past tied myself up in knots about this, so we're going to do it really simple this time. I'm weighing my empty jar, 1,049 grams. So I know what the empty jar weighs. I'm just going to pack my stuff in there and add enough water to cover it, and then weigh again, and that will give me the weight of the whole contents, water and leaves. And then I'm going to use 2.5% of that weight in salt. I am this time making a pickle that's going to include some fresh chilies, well, nearly fresh. These are some chilies that need using up. I don't think that'll be quite hot enough for me, so I've got some extra hot chili flakes, and I don't know how much of this I'm going to use. So again, I've pre-weighed this, 365 grams, and I'll weigh it at the end, and I'm just going to do it by eye, but at least at the end I'll be able to tell you what the weight is if you care about doing this precisely. I'm sorting through this mainly because I want to get any actual pieces of dirt washed off. If there's any actual soil on it, I'd like to wash that off, just because I don't want grit in my pickle. And any leaves like this that are just tattered and withered and looking a bit sad, I think we'll just put those in the compost. Now, the other reason for sorting through all of this is that this was growing together with bluebells. I want to be really certain I haven't picked any bluebells along with it, because bluebells are toxic, ramsons are not. So I'm just sifting through it just to make sure that the leaves I've got are recognisably wild garlic and not the much narrower strap-like leaves of bluebells. I will also be pickling the flower buds and stems along with this. And then in terms of process, I'm just going to snip it directly into that jar. Cutting the leaves into like about 1 centimetre. I'm by no means an expert at lacto fermentation. I've only really been doing this the last 5 years perhaps. So I will put some links in the video description to some videos and resources of people who do this a lot more than I do and know a lot more about this than I do. I know enough to get by. So I want to go for a kind of kimchi vibe to this. It's not obviously going to be kimchi because there's no cabbage in there at all. And there's not going to be any shrimp paste in there either. The wild garlic has its own pungency, which is kind of somewhat similar to what you'll get from pickled cabbage. Right, and then every now and again, we're just going to have a little sprinkle of chili flakes and a few little snips fresh chilli. I'm going to snip this fairly thin. So that's the process. I'm just going to carry on like that until the jar is full. So here's a couple of examples of kind of bycatch from picking this wild garlic, because I was just cutting it in great big bunches and handfuls. So we've got a lovely little snail there. And a celandine leaf. Technically toxic. Tiny little amount like that wouldn't hurt anybody. Some people do actually eat celandine in salads in small quantities. Mainly the flowers, I think. But some people do actually nibble on the leaves. A large amount of it will probably harm you. But anyway, and the snail, even though I have enough snails in my garden already, the snail can go and live in my garden. Now there will, I imagine, be some people watching for whom there's a hygiene question here. And so yeah, I'm just washing this in plain water and not very thoroughly. I'm not really bothering to sterilise anything like the jars. And I'm certainly not really actually aiming for full sanitisation of these vegetables. And yet this is not going to be cooked as such. Although I suppose you could say that the pickling process is somewhat analogous to cooking. But this process won't work if you're super hygienic about everything. If you tried to sanitise these leaves, I don't know, wash them in hydrogen peroxide or something like that. Some people do that with some things. If you tried to sanitize these leaves to that degree, the fermentation process would very likely fail, because it's the living bacteria that are present on these leaves that are going to actually make the pickle work. Feeding on the sugars and other resources in the plant material, and they're going to multiply to such a degree that they will create the lactic acid that pickles these vegetables. We're aiming for a particular type of bacteria, lactobacilli, although actually it's more like a kind of group of bacteria. So in there at the moment, attached to these leaves, there will be a whole community of different organisms living their lives on these leaves. There will be various bacteria, some of which will make you probably quite ill if you ate them, plus yeasts, other microorganisms that aren't bacteria, protozoans, those sorts of things. And if they were just left alone, this would just rot, basically. But we're going to go for a very controlled rot by adding salt. And salt will favour the lactobacilli and unbalance the whole equation in their favour. And thus, the lactobacilli will multiply, and they create lactic acid as a waste product. And that waste product is acidic and will pickle these vegetables. So anyway, long story short, if you're too hygienic about this, I mean, it's actually quite hard to do that. But if you were to be strictly hygienic about this, let's say you sterilise that by steaming it or putting it in an autoclave or something like that, you'd find the pickling process just doesn't work. And a bit of the chilli flakes. Obviously, during the pickling process, these things will infuse. I don't think the lactobacilli care at all about chili. I don't think this is, although chili does have some antiseptic properties, I don't think it will affect the fermentation. Certainly you can lacto-ferment capsicums, so I imagine it's got to be okay. Right, that's about as full as I can make it, and that is packed down quite tight. I'm going to fill it up with water now. Just plain water for the moment. Now in the past, I've used bottled water for this because it doesn't have any chlorine in it. I'm actually using tap water today because I think it's going to be okay. I usually err on the side of caution and use bottled water, spring water, but I'm going to use tap water today. My tap water doesn't smell of chlorine when it comes out the tap, so it probably hasn't got a great abundance of chlorine in that. I don't think it will affect the fermentation. So we'll give that a squeeze down. You can see all the air coming out of it. So that's about my liquid level. I need to leave some headspace for an airlock, which I'll talk about in a minute. So I think I'll have a little tidy up first, then we'll come back and put the salt in. So weighing this whole jar, including all of the contents, the water and the vegetables, which gives us contents weight of 1635. 2.5% of that is 41, basically. So 41 grams of salt are going to go into there. It seems like quite a lot of salt, but it needs that to pickle. Oh, the chilies, by the way, at the end of the process, I've got 362. I've used about 3 grams of dried super hot chilies. There's no reason why you can't make this without the chilies, actually, if you don't like spicy. So we need 41 grams of salt. Now obviously just dumping that salt into the top of this jar would not work very well. It wouldn't get down to the bottom. So we're going to very carefully pour the water out of this jar. You can already see how it's taken on some of the juices of the wild onions. I'm just going to keep on tipping that because it's going to take a little while to percolate out of the jar. I reckon that's the most of it. Okay. And then my salt, I'm going to dissolve into that. So just stir the salt until it dissolves completely into this juice, and then pour that back over. This jug doesn't always pour very cleanly, but if we're decisive about it, it should do. That's now the brine, so the original water plus the salt back in there. That is now at the right concentration for pickling, but we need to do something about this top bit, because if these bits are exposed to air, they will just spoil, and they might even go mouldy. So I'm going to make a little airlock here. And said airlock is not going to be anything more complicated than a plastic bag, which I'm going to push down into that headspace. I'm just going to use my fingers here inside the bag to just push it down and push down the pickle into the brine, especially around the edges, which is where it'll be prone to float up. And then a little bit of water in there just to give it some weight. And then I can gather that back up. Just put a twist tie around it. And that should do it. The weight of that bag with the liquid in it is just keeping the contents of the jar, the dry contents, the leafy bits, submerged under the brine. Any gases from fermentation, and there will be some, will bubble up through the mixture over the next few days. This just needs to be left somewhere at room temperature. And I'm not going to close the lid tightly. I'm just going to put it like that. I may put another bag over the top of this and secure that with a rubber band to stop little fruit flies or whatever getting into it. And that's it. We just need to leave that at room temperature now for probably a couple of weeks. So I doubt you'll see the end of this in this video, but probably next month we'll be actually eating some of this pickle. Okay, the next day there is a conspicuous smell of garlic in this room, and there's a kind of layer of liquid at the bottom of the jar, which means that air bubbles are forming in there, which means bacterial stuff is going on, because that's creating air bubbles, that's creating gases, and those gases will cause the leaves to float up. So it's well underway. I'm probably going to move it out of the lounge here because it smells now. Not unpleasant, just doesn't really smell like a smell you want in the lounge. Right, this plot here, we want to grow some courgettes here. It's not warm enough to plant them out just yet. However, I have a plan. I've bought a cheap tarp. Excuse me. It's a reinforced transparent tarp. I'm going to try to make a little polytunnel here. You alright? So we got plenty of these metal hoops. They were left here by the previous owners of the house. That's very useful. So I've got 4 of these hoops on here now. 4 meters by 5 meters should cover this, including the ends. So let's see if I got that right. Well, it looks like I've got my calculations right. There is some slack on this side, which I did expect. So what I'm going to do is I've folded it up. This is the sun comes from over here. That's south. So I've left the slack on the north side so I can fold it up here and it won't create extra shade. There is obviously going to be a little bit of shade from this because that reinforcement is not transparent. But there's a fair bit of light inside. And this should get the soil temperature up, ready for us to plant courgettes and pumpkins in here. So yeah, I think that's actually going to work pretty well. I've got to tidy up this side still, but that's a 2-person job, so I'll wait till Jenny's back. Just after about half an hour of having this on here, I stuck my hand up underneath, and it's warm in there already today, even on an overcast day like today, where there's very little sunshine.
but there's just enough warmth coming through the clouds to warm this up. I've left the weed suppression material on the soil at the moment as well because it's black, and that will absorb extra heat and hopefully get it into the soil. It's warming the soil up that we need to do before we can actually get the plants planted in here.
Chalky soil, such as we have here at Shrimp Cottage in the garden, is often described as hungry. That is to say that the soil decomposes organic matter and nutrients that are added to it very rapidly. And that's a problem at the moment. Actually, some of the things I've started this spring have not taken off very well. And actually, we did have some problems with things getting started last year. And I think what we have is a soil fertility problem. Now, last year we did work around that significantly by adding a huge amount of well-rotted manure to the raised beds. This year, nearly everything that I added has just disappeared. It hasn't really made any difference. The level's gone back down to where it was. Now, why am I mentioning this while I'm filling up my pressure cooker with bones and vegetable trimmings to make stock, as you've seen me do before? Well, because today we're going to take the wasting nothing thing that this stock pot is often about to new heights, or maybe depths.
And so you can see, for example, this is where the radishes all came up. And they came up and just kind of stalled. They haven't really produced much more than their pair of seed leaves. And in fact, some of them have been eaten while we were waiting for anything to happen. So this soil, which had tons of manure on it last year, has consumed all of that manure and is back to being relatively infertile. Now we can overcome that by feeding it. So on this plot here where we're going to grow the courgettes, I've got loads and loads of compost from our big compost bin. It's layered on top of the soil. And here I've got my bin juice compost thing started already. So this is where I just get a bin. It's got a hole drilled in the bottom. And I've got nettles and comfrey and other soft weeds in there, weighed down. Give it a little bit of water every now and again. And it decomposes in here aerobically. And what drips out the bottom is this stuff. Basically black gold. This is excellent plant food. This is full of nitrogen and phosphorus and potassium. All of the things that healthy plants need to grow because it came out of healthy plants that were growing. So this diluted in water, in the watering can, can be just used as a regular feed for the plants. But for plants that are going to put on a lot of growth, it'd be good if we could actually give them something really to get their roots down into.
So, at the end of that process, lovely, great big pot of steaming, mostly chicken stock. I think there's turkey bones in here as well. And normally what I do is just strain this like this. And then all these bits I'm straining out here, I put them into the food waste bin. We have a council food waste collection. It goes off to a biogas digester. So any food waste or food residue like this goes into a big digester. It gets processed. It produces biogas, methane, which is used for, I think, maybe power generation. But I think also there might be some of the local buses are fueled on it. And yeah, so normally I just chuck all the bones away. However, I mean, you've heard of people using bone meal as fertiliser in the garden. It's one of the old-fashioned sort of organic fertilisers. So how about we save some of these chicken bones, smash them up. I mean, that won't be difficult because having been pressure cooked, they're crumbly anyway. Also very hot. And we'll process those down into meal, and I'm going to use that in the garden. Now, I don't think these large turkey bones will have gone crumbly in the same way. Yeah, no, these haven't. So I'm not going to do those, the turkey bones, but the chicken bones I will. First thing to do is get this all strained, and then I will decant this lovely chicken and turkey stock, well, chicken, turkey and vegetable stock, into some containers that I can freeze it in. So I should probably be patient and wait for this all to cool, but I shan't. So yeah, these bones here, the chicken bones, we are going to find, yeah, they just break apart really easily. So all these chicken bones are going to go into the food processor here. Now you might be wondering, if this is as good as I'm hoping it is, why I don't do this all the time and just scatter this on my garden. And the main reason for that is obviously Eva's favourite thing is chicken. And so if I was to put this anywhere that I can't fence off, chances are she'd be attracted to dig it up. However, with the patch where I'm growing the courgettes, it's going to be fenced off. So hopefully, famous last words, we'll keep Eva out of it. So let us now see what happens when I put chicken bones in the food processor. Interesting. Kind of working. So we've got a kind of weird paste, looks a lot like kind of cheap pate. Spoilers, that might be how they make cheap pate. But the food processor is just kind of spinning these things around, so I'm going to give it a bit of assistance here. Actually just break these up a little bit more by hand. I probably could have just done this by putting it all in a bag and crushing it with a rolling pin. Maybe in future I will, because this is an awful mess. Okay. I think we may have achieved the desired result. So this is a messy paste. Not that that matters. There are still some biggish chunks there. So give them another run through. So into there. And yeah, this is gross, isn't it? But the plants are hopefully going to love this, because these bones are full of phosphates and potassium. And so, yeah, when we plant the courgettes, we'll put a little spoonful of that in the bottom of the hole.
Time to plant those courgettes, and I'm just going to first peel back this cover, this tarp, over to that side so I can work from this side. I was going to remove this black weed suppressant material, but it's getting really torn up. Eva actually dug a hole in it right there. This fabric's going to have to be disposed of at the end of this year, so I actually think I'm going to plant directly through it and use this to keep the weeds down, which is doing a somewhat reasonable job of. But you can see these are potatoes, they need to come out. Okay, I'm going to have to dig those out. Those are potatoes, we must have missed those from last year. I'm not entertaining volunteer potatoes this year, so I'm going to have a little dig before I plant my courgettes. Yeah, we must have missed 1 or 2 potatoes last year when we dug them out of this plot. This is where we grew potatoes last year, and so the ones we've missed have stayed there all winter and are popping up now, and I don't think I've actually found the potato there, which is annoying. Yeah, there's still some plant, there's still a potato somewhere down there. There's one of them. So even a tiny little piece of potato like that, little potato that we missed last year, can stick around in the soil and sprout the next year. But as I say, I don't want to grow. Last year I thought, hey look, 3 potatoes, but they can be a vector for potato blight, or actually blight which can affect tomatoes as well. So this year we're not entertaining the feral potatoes. I am growing potatoes on purpose, but I'm not going to let them just grow themselves. Yeah, that one I think is probably was pink fir apple that we grew here. But as you can see, we've got lots and lots of lovely compost on here, so hopefully this will give this soil some food anyway. Courgettes are quite hungry and they do like to get their roots right down. So hopefully all this bulky organic matter we've added on here will help them do that. Those potatoes are a minor annoyance because it means I've had to dig this up, and I really didn't intend to, but we'll just have to make the best of it. I'm just going to weigh this fabric down for now because it's a bit breezy out here, and actually I need to get these courgettes in and then the polytunnel back over the top before the wind rocks them too much, because significant enemy of courgettes and marrows and pumpkins is wind rock. If these things get flapped around in the wind, it tears the stem at the bottom and then they just never take off. So if I was more of a man of science than what I are, then I might be tempted to say, okay, well, why don't we plant half of these with that homemade bone meal and half of them without, and see if it really makes a difference. Which would be truly glorious for the sake of science and all that, but these are my courgettes and I want them to do well. And so I'm actually just going to decide that what we have is what we have. So I won't be able to tell you that my results from putting my weird fake bone meal paste in the bottom of the planting hole, well, I won't be able to attribute my success or failure to that factor. However, hopefully we'll see some results anyway. So there are actually in most of these pots 2 seedlings, which is not exactly ideal. We weren't expecting germination to be quite so reliable as it has been. So we've got 2 seedlings in each pot, and I haven't thinned them because I don't like doing that. So we will have some, there's a little bit of a crowding issue here, but there's lovely deep soil. I'm putting an empty pot in next to each one of them so that I can water into that pot. And the water will get down off the soil surface instead of running off. The water will penetrate down into the soil, hopefully get to the roots. Right, that's the courgettes planted and the weirdly meaty fertilizer all used up. A nice drink to settle them in, which I will do around the plants and then into those pots as well. So I'll water them around their roots the first time around just to settle them in. That just washes the soil down into any voids that I might have created when I planted them. And then we fill up the pots like that. And then one final thing before we cover those all up, which is, now I don't like using pesticides in general, but these plants are very vulnerable to slugs. Slugs and snails will come in and they'll just eat that little bit there, just the growing point, and that's all it takes. And that destroys the plant. And after that, unless it's got any buds below that, it can't grow. Then that's it for the plant. The seed leaves get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it just does nothing. So, just a very light sprinkling of slug pellets around the plants. They only really need a couple each, and that'll just keep everything under control until these plants get too big for the slugs to want to eat. Because once they get established, these things will be tough and kind of slightly woody, and the slugs won't be interested at all. But at this point they're really tender. And actually when I put this plastic back over, obviously I'm creating a moist environment which slugs will love. So yeah, need a little bit of control just at this point. Okay, so the tunnel is back over. This is what it looks like on the inside. So you can see there's a fair bit of light getting through. Certainly enough for these plants, I think. I'm just going to seal this down. I'll leave a couple of little breathing holes at either end so it doesn't go mouldy in here. But that's it for now. And so now what we do is just wait for these. I'll check on them every couple of days. Obviously I have to get under here, just under the edges, and get some water in there to keep them alive. And then we'll see what happens with our courgettes. Hopefully we'll have a bumper crop this year because of weird meat paste fertilizer. But time will tell. And also, of course, we've got this lovely chicken and turkey stock. We're about 1.5 litres of it, I think. Maybe even 2 litres. Which can be used for making soups, paella, risotto, stews, or just gravy. I think these are 1 litre tubs, so there's about 3/4 of a litre in each of those. Just a bit less than a litre actually in there left, and these 2 can go in the freezer. Nearly all of my tomato seedlings are out here in the greenhouse now, and I've potted them on, and hopefully you'll see that compared to what they looked like earlier in the video, they are quite a bit healthier looking. Some of them are still a bit slow, but some of them are getting really yellowed leaves. That seed compost, that John Innes seed compost, wherever it is, doesn't have a lot of nutrient in it.
And so you pretty much have to start feeding your plants as soon as the leaves appear. A couple of these need planting out. I've got 4 varieties that I've grown: Golden Sunrise, Gardener's Delight, Tigerella, and Marmande. Marmande is the slowest of the lot by the look of it. I'm going to plant these 2 Golden Sunrise seedlings here, these 2 big ones. So let's go up to the upstairs greenhouse and see what that's all about. So in the upstairs greenhouse here, I'm going to grow the tomatoes directly in the soil this year, but I'm going to try using these tomato halos. And so the idea with these is you plant them, you put them on the soil like that, something like that. You plant your tomato into the middle, you water into the outer ring, and the plant can grow down and get its roots right down into the soil. And that outer ring waters it slowly and delivers the water directly to the roots of the plant. That's the theory. You can plonk these things straight on top of grow bags, but I'm going to use them on the soil. And I did add a load of compost to this soil in late winter, and I have been letting the worms just take it down mostly, and they've done a really good job. So I'm going to just give it a little dig over because I've got a thing to do. So this soil might be still a bit hungry, and I got fish, blood and bone, kind of metal sounding plant fertilizer. Very traditional fertilizer, this one. This is interesting, it's in pelletized form. When I've got fish, blood and bone in the past, it's just been kind of ground up powdery stuff. This has been pelletized. Makes it a bit more convenient to handle. So I'm going to scatter about a handful of this on every metre or so of soil, and I'm going to give it a little light dig in. That should give these tomato plants lots of lovely food in this soil, so once they get their roots down, they'll be able to feed on that and produce a bumper crop for me. And yeah, I'll just kind of work that into the soil just like that. So just space them out along there and to the side where they're going to go. I'm going to put them so that one of these angled cane slots is at the back there, because that will make it easy for me to slot a cane down there later. Not much later. Once the tomato plants need to start growing, they will need support. Some people do that with string. So I could tie string to the top of the greenhouse, but there's not really... Well, there is this cane, but I'll probably just put stakes in. So that spacing is about right. I'm going to push that down so that it's nicely bedded into the soil like that. Compost into that middle, into that central well, up to a certain point. Knock it out. Yep, it's got a root system that's nearly occupying the pot. Just about holding together for everything there. So into the ring. And then we can just top that off with a bit more compost. And again, we can bury the stem a bit here. It won't mind. In fact, it will enjoy that. Probably should have put a piece of cardboard over the top of this ring so that I don't fill it up with compost, but not much has fallen down there. Well, I might as well put a tag in there. And for the first week or so after I plant each of these, I'm only going to water into this top bit here, just to help that plant get its roots down. Later on, we water into that bit. But not now, except just then. And so yeah, those moat things around there, so we'll be able to actually water just into there once or twice a day and fill that to the brim, and it will slowly percolate down into the soil. Watering right down at root level, encouraging the roots to go deep and to spread out as well. I decided on second thoughts to plant Tigerella as well. So we've got 2 of Golden Sunrise, 2 of Tigerella, and then I'm going to have 1 of Gardener's Delight and 1 of Marmande up this end. There is plenty of other space in the greenhouse. Well, these bits don't have compost on them. I might still get some more of these rings or something and plant some more tomatoes around here, but I've got to save some of this space for chilies. One last thing to mention is I'm going to try a bit of companion planting this year. So I've got 2 different sorts of marigolds, Tagetes and Calendula, and I'm going to plant these around the tomatoes. Supposedly that does help to inhibit pests, attract pollinators. I think there might be some kind of synergy even between the plants. Who knows, but we'll give it a go. Very desperately in need of planting out. Now these will compete a little bit with the tomatoes for nutrients and especially water, I suppose. Nutrients I don't think will be a problem because of that, all of that fish blood and bone I've added to the soil here. Water, well, the tagetes at least are a kind of relatively arid climate plant, so they'll probably be okay with whatever water they can scavenge from around. I will water them to begin with. I suspect once they get their root systems established, they won't need very much extra. They'll just figure it out. So we'll have the tagetes along the back there like that, and the calendula in front. I think I might only plant 5 calendula in the gaps in between. Okay, and again, these will just need a water in, just to settle them in, help them get their roots down. Once they get established, I'm hoping these won't need a lot of water. I appreciate, again, that's been a rather gardening heavy episode, but I'm sure you got that from the thumbnail and the title anyway. Time for the comment positivity section. And this is where I'm just going to pick out a dozen or so comments that just contributed to the sort of general positivity of the comments. So here we go. This was on the illuminated display electronic project. I enjoyed that. When's part 2, Shrimp? Good question. I have let that project lapse, partly because the days have got longer, the weather's got warmer, garden took priority. That really was a kind of winter project, but I must get back to it. I will do part 2. I've got all the components. I can see them down there, actually, and I've got to get back to that project and complete it. I haven't abandoned it completely. I will get back to it at some point, but I don't know when. Perhaps if it rains a lot or something. Perhaps if we get a rainy weekend. There's a bank holiday coming up when I record this, which means it's bound to rain. So perhaps I'll get back on that then. On the scam seeds video. Roses are red as my heart bleeds. I just found out you can't grow cats from seeds. I do appreciate a little bit of comic poetry once in a while. The next one, it was on the same video. Lol, can you stinking imagine if it wasn't a scam and the sunflower end up actually being blue? That would be hilarious. A few people have said that, and I've said if it is, and it won't be. I'll be honest and I will show you blue sunflowers if that's what comes up. It won't be. And I will eat a small edible hat. I think this might have been on the cheap things video. Recently, Lidl's been selling a tin of peas for 9p. What sorcery is this in 2024? Well, good question. Everybody's been talking about this, and I actually did get a can. Here we go. Lidl green peas, rehydrated, in a can. 9p I paid for this can of peas. And I almost was tempted to put this on weird stuff in a can, because there's weird stuff here going on, but I don't know that it really qualifies for an episode of its own. We'll switch to a slightly closer view now. I mean, firstly, it's weird that they're selling it for 9p a can. Nextly, it is weirdly packaged. The label design is painted or printed on the can, which obviously I have seen before, but that is slightly unusual for this kind of product. But also, even though this is just Lidl's kind of basics brand, the Simply brand, there's something about the can when it's presented in this way. I think when it's printed on the can like this, and there's an enormous amount of white space around the nutrition label and around the can in general, it just gives the whole thing a bit of a feel of government issue peas. There's just something a bit weird about this can. As I say, I'm not sure any or even all of that together makes enough of a reason for this to be weird stuff in a can, but I have got a can of green peas from Lidl, rehydrated, which is nothing particularly special. These are just peas that have been grown to maturity and harvested and dried, and then rehydrated and cooked. So these are like mealy peas. If you mash these up with a bit of mint, they'd be mushy peas. But there's nothing particularly unusual about that. You could get tinned marrow fat peas and they probably wouldn't be all that different from this. I do wonder how green they're going to be actually. If they're very green, it will probably be artificial colours. Are there artificial colours in here? Apparently not. Rehydrated green peas and water is all that's in here, so I doubt they're actually all that green. It's going to be more of a kind of camo green than fresh green, I imagine. Anyway, perhaps we'll open them in the next random stuff video. Next is on the same video, weave the cooked spaghetti into a flatbread. So this is where I tried to make flatbreads out of ground up cooked spaghetti, but weaving it into a flatbread, so like a spaghetti purse or something, or a little bit of spaghetti macrame. Macrame. Anyway, I did like the idea of that, knitting spaghetti. I'm not going to do it because I think it might be one of those things that maybe sounds a bit easier than it really is. But I do like the idea. Same video again. Interesting. I know you say there are no wrong answers and such, but yet I'm wondering, is it wrong for me to kind of like the green bananas? Like not grass green, but a little bit more green than people would normally buy them when they're a bit more firm. And personally, I feel they taste more of banana than of typically fully mature yellow banana. Good question. And yeah, so, okay. I like bananas at the riper end of the spectrum. So I would say the perfect banana for me is when they're yellow and they've got little brown dots on them. A bit like a perfectly cooked pancake in appearance on the outside. And when they're sweet and aromatically banana, but not completely mushy or starting to go transparent inside. So that's where I like my bananas. But yeah, of course, there is nothing wrong with other people liking things that I don't. I have often joked in the past that bananas that are green aren't bananas yet. But yeah, if you like them green, it does tend to mean you'll get the best bananas because you'll pick them when they're all on display, whereas I've got to pick them when they're ripening, or ripen them at home, of course. But yeah, if you know what you like, more power to you. It's important to know what you like because then you can steer your choices towards things that will make you happy. So yeah, more power to you if you like green bananas. I don't personally, but if you do, then enjoy your green bananas. And also, don't let somebody else dictate your preferences. Same video again, although I see this quite a lot in the comments, actually, this kind of thing. Just somebody saying, this turned around my very bad day. And I really appreciate that when, you know, I'm just making the stuff that makes me happy and the stuff I feel I've got to do. But it's really lovely when I see that somebody says, oh, I watched the video and it cheered me up a little bit, or just lifted me, or I'm having a really hard time and it helped me get through the day. Really lovely to see that. What was especially lovely to see on this particular case was somebody else replied to that and said, I hope you feel better soon. Just lovely, lovely little kind of support group positivity right there in the comments. Doesn't mean a whole lot to anybody else, but I really love to see that happening, and I think the internet could do with a bit more of that. Next, on the Pickle Primroses video, somebody said, for those struggling to find A Country Harvest due to its rarity, it was first published as All Good Things Around Us. So that's really genuinely useful. Oh, my accent light has run out of juice, so we'll carry on regardless. That's genuinely useful, thank you, because a lot of people saw that book and went looking for it, and unfortunately what tends to happen with that is that Country Harvest book, there might have been 2 copies of it available on eBay, and the moment I mention it in a video and a few people want it, it's gone. So as far as we can tell now, that book has been published under 3 different covers. So All Good Things Around Us initially, Country Harvest, which is the one I've got, and again afterwards as Edible Wild Plants and Herbs. And as far as I can tell, those are substantially the same book, perhaps some small updates in the later editions. If you're looking for a copy of that book, and it is a really great book, all of the details I've been able to find about each of the editions of that will be in the video description. Tiny little comment on the video that had the navelwort, the wall pennywort in it, called Venus Bellybutton in Portugal. I think I like that name better than navelwort, which is essentially the same thing, or pennywort. Venus Bellybutton's quite a romantic sounding name. So Portugal has got, so far, in my opinion, the best name for this plant, but if you know other names for pennywort, which is Umbilicus rupestris, then do let me know in the comments. It's not a competition, by the way, but Portugal's winning. And then lots of comments like these on the pottery pattern matching video. So somebody said, those exact matches are incredibly satisfying. I can imagine the excitement finding them. And it was tremendously satisfying. It was sort of like the distilled feeling of completing the last bit of a jigsaw puzzle, but over and over again, and just the best bits. It made me feel a little bit like I'd walked into a room and there's a tray of cupcakes and I just ate the cherries off of all of them. Right, next comment is a comment on an old video about this spinning top that I made years and years ago. I made this out of lolly sticks stuck together, coloured lolly sticks, and the colour shows through, and I called it rainbow plywood. But somebody said, if the stem were longer, you'd almost have a spindle of the type that can spin wool or silk, or hair from some breeds of dog. Drop spindles might have a hook on the top end, and supported spindles would sit in a bowl. Turkish spindle would have cross pieces of wood as centre instead of a round whirl. Spinning wheels are a relatively recent invention. I'm a spinner in the US who borrows a friendly sheep or fibre goat to take to a Renaissance fair one weekend each September, and one of my favourite images to give people is that the sail on a Viking ship would have needed every thread, as it was woven from handspun with a spindle, as they didn't have wheels. So yeah, that's quite an image, isn't it? So the sail on a Viking ship, you've got an image of that in your head, a big red and white stripy sail. I don't know if that was reality, but anyway, every little thread in that woven sail would have to be spun by hand using a kind of gravity spindle. I guess with long dark nights up north and no TV, there was probably time for that kind of activity. And finally, make a video of just flowers changing colour with silly music. So, okay, let's do that. So just for you, well, and for anybody else who's interested, but because you asked, here we go. For viewers with visual sensitivities, the following footage does contain some rapidly changing colours and images, but no actual strobing. I'm putting this at the end of the video in case you feel you need to skip it for that reason, so there's nothing else to miss afterwards. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.